Why do religions fear questions? On the surface, this might seem puzzling, since most faiths claim to be built on ultimate truth. If a belief system rests on truth, then questions should only strengthen it. A true claim can withstand scrutiny. Yet, history and daily life both reveal a consistent pattern. Religions often discourage inquiry, punish skepticism, and portray doubt as a moral weakness. The fear of questions runs so deep that entire institutions are built around preventing them. To understand why, we need to look closely at how religion functions, not just as a set of ideas, but as a system of control. A question is not just a request for information. It is a crack in the wall. It is the mind refusing to be satisfied with the given answer. Every question is a test, not of the person asking, but of the structure that is supposed to provide answers. That's where the danger lies. Religions claim certainty about things no human can actually verify. What happens after death? The nature of the universe, the existence of unseen beings. Questions force that certainty to reveal its fragility. When a child asks, if God made everything, who made God? Or when an adult asks, why does an all-powerful being allow so much suffering? These are not trivial inquiries. They are the kind of questions that can unravel a system held together by authority rather than evidence. Historically, suppression of questions has been essential for religions to maintain dominance. In medieval Europe, people who questioned church dogma risked being branded as heretics, tortured, or killed. In Islamic history, scholars who challenged orthodox interpretations were exiled or silenced. Even in modern times, questioning certain doctrines can lead to social ostracism, loss of family ties, or even violence. This is not random cruelty. It's a survival mechanism. Systems that rely on unquestioned authority cannot afford an environment where every idea is up for debate. At the heart of this fear lies vulnerability. Religion often makes grand claims that cannot be tested. If someone says a God answers prayers, all it takes is one person to point out unanswered prayers to expose the inconsistency. If someone says moral law comes only from Scripture, all it takes is one comparison with societies outside that Scripture to show morality exists without it. Every question opens a door to comparison, and comparison is lethal to monopolies. Religions want to be the sole source of meaning, morality, and truth. Questions are a threat because they invite people to check other sources. Another reason religions fear questions is that they blur the line between believer and non-believer. Once someone starts asking, they are already standing half outside the system. Religion often functions like a closed circle. Once you are in, you are told that leaving is the worst thing imaginable. Questions are the first step out. Leaders sense this, which is why so many traditions equate doubt with sin. A curious mind is portrayed as rebellious, prideful, or even dangerous. By demonizing questions, religions try to cut them off before they spread. But why would questioning spread so easily? Because humans are naturally curious. We are born asking why. Children constantly challenge authority with endless questions, not because they want to undermine it, but because they want to understand. This curiosity is a human instinct that has given us science, philosophy, and art. Religion stands in tension with that instinct because its answers are fixed. Unlike science, which thrives on revision and correction, religion depends on permanence. It does not want to be provisional, it wants to be eternal. Questions undermine eternity by reminding us that human knowledge evolves. There's also a political dimension. Religion is not just about gods and rituals. It's about power. Throughout history, religious institutions have aligned with kings, emperors, and governments to strengthen their authority. Power resists accountability. A simple question like, why does the priest live in luxury while the followers struggle, exposes hypocrisy. Questions challenge not only theological claims, but also the social structures tied to them. That's why religious leaders throughout history have often been quick to silence philosophers, reformers, and even ordinary people who ask too many questions. Consider education. In many religious schools, students are taught doctrine before critical thinking. They are given answers before they even know the questions. This reversal is deliberate. If you teach people how to think, they will inevitably ask. If you teach them what to think, you reduce the risk of questions. This is why so many religions prefer memorization of scripture over analytical reasoning. Repetition breeds loyalty, while inquiry breeds independence. Psychology also plays a role. Questions create discomfort. They force us to confront uncertainty, and uncertainty is frightening. Religion offers comfort precisely by avoiding that discomfort. If someone asks, "What happens after we die?" and the religion says, "You will live forever in paradise," that answer soothes fear. If you then question it, the fear of death returns. The mind resists that return. Leaders capitalize on this by portraying questions as dangerous, not because they truly are, but because they remove the protective layer of certainty. In this sense, questioning is feared not only by religious institutions, but also by the individual who wants to hold on to comfort. Religions also fear questions because they spread. One question does not stay confined to the individual who asks it. In a community built on shared belief, one doubt can ripple outward. This is why censorship and taboos exist. Think of how certain topics are completely off limits in religious circles. Evolution, historical contradictions in scripture, the psychological origins of belief. Once raised, these questions cannot be unheard. They become seeds, often lying dormant until someone is ready to confront them. Leaders know this, which is why they label them as dangerous even before they are asked. The suppression of questions also reveals something ironic. If a religion were truly confident in its claims, it would welcome scrutiny. A scientific theory, for example, gains credibility when tested, challenged, and still holds up. Religion avoids that process because it knows the outcomes would not be favorable. The fear of questions is therefore an indirect admission of weakness. It shows that the system is less about truth and more about control. This becomes clear when we look at how religions treat different kinds of questions. Harmless questions are allowed. What does this symbol mean? How should I perform this ritual? But existential questions, does this God exist? Is this scripture reliable? Are forbidden. The distinction reveals the underlying motive. Harmless questions keep people engaged in the system. Dangerous questions threaten to break them free from it. The fear of questions also has an evolutionary logic in terms of group survival. In tightly knit religious groups, unity is seen as strength. A single question is not just an intellectual challenge, it's a threat to cohesion. If one person begins to doubt, others may follow, and the group risks fragmentation. In societies where religion is tied to political power, fragmentation is more than an inconvenience. It's a risk to authority. That's why questioning religion has often been equated with betrayal, treason, or even witchcraft. The punishment is not only about silencing the individual, but about warning the group, stay inside, or face the consequences. One striking example is how questions about scripture are handled. Most sacred texts contain contradictions, outdated moral codes, or passages that reflect the culture of their time rather than timeless truth. Pointing this out is often treated as disrespectful. In some communities, simply asking why a holy book says one thing in one place and the opposite in another can lead to outrage. The reaction is not intellectual, but defensive, as if the very act of questioning is an attack. This shows how fragile the authority of Scripture actually is. A book that was truly divine would not need human defenders shouting down its critics. Its truth would be self-evident. Another angle is how questions threaten identity. For many believers, religion is not just a set of ideas, but a core part of who they are. To question the belief is to question the self. This makes questions feel like personal attacks, even when they are directed at abstract doctrines. Leaders amplify this by teaching that doubt is betrayal, not only of the faith, but of family, culture, and ancestors. The result is that people feel guilty even for entertaining questions in their own minds. That guilt is a powerful form of self-censorship, often stronger than any external punishment. It's also worth looking at the economic side. Religion is often financially sustained by the devotion of its followers. Donations, offerings, and tithes flow only as long as belief is strong. Questions weaken belief. If someone doubts that a church or mosque truly represents divine will, they are less likely to give money. This makes questions a financial threat. Leaders know this, which is why financial incentives are often tied to suppressing doubt. In some traditions, giving money is portrayed as proof of faith. To question where that money goes is framed as spiritual weakness. The less people ask, the more secure the institution's income. There's also a historical irony. Many of the greatest leaps in human knowledge came from people who dared to question religious authority. Galileo asked whether the Earth really was the center of the universe, and was silenced by the Church. Darwin asked whether species were fixed or evolved, and was vilified by religious leaders. These questions did not destroy humanity, they advanced it. Yet, even now, similar resistance persists. Schools in some parts of the world still ban teaching evolution because it conflicts with Scripture. The fear of questions has not disappeared. It has only shifted form. From a psychological perspective, we can see why individuals cling to dogma. Questions create cognitive dissonance, the uncomfortable feeling when beliefs and reality clash. To reduce dissonance, people often reject the question rather than re-examine the belief. Religion exploits this by framing the questioning itself as immoral. This way, the discomfort is resolved not by changing the belief, but by blaming the questioner. It's a clever trick that keeps the system intact while isolating anyone who challenges it. The paradox is that the very act of forbidding questions ensures they will eventually be asked. Curiosity cannot be eliminated, only delayed. Throughout history, suppression has always led to eventual rebellion. When questions are forbidden, they do not disappear. They gather force underground until they break through. The Protestant Reformation, the Enlightenment, and the rise of secular thought all began with questions that could not be silenced. The fear of questions may delay change, but it cannot prevent it forever. If we look at religions cross-culturally, the pattern repeats. In ancient societies, questioning the gods was seen as dangerous because it undermined the social order. In modern societies, questioning is still portrayed as dangerous, though the methods of silencing may be more subtle: social exclusion, ridicule, or endless diversion. But the core principle remains the same. Questions destabilize authority. They remind people that power rests not on truth, but on compliance. Another interesting point is how religions sometimes attempt to co-opt questions. Leaders may encourage small, safe questions to give the illusion of openness. These are questions that do not challenge the core. For example, a preacher may welcome questions about the meaning of a parable, but not about whether the parable is historically accurate. This controlled questioning is a safety valve. It gives people the sense of intellectual engagement without risking the foundation. True inquiry, however, always goes further, and that is where the real fear begins. When religions fear questions, they reveal their priorities. Their goal is not truth, but stability. Their concern is not whether beliefs correspond to reality, but whether they keep people loyal. Questions by their very nature are loyal only to truth. That is why they clash with faith. A question is not satisfied with authority. It demands evidence, coherence, and consistency. Religion cannot supply those things without risking collapse. Therefore, the system treats questions as enemies, even though they are the very tools that have advanced human civilization in every other domain. If we explore the cultural dynamics, another layer becomes clear. Questions disrupt tradition. Religions often present themselves as guardians of heritage, preserving rituals and teachings passed down for generations. To question those teachings is to disrupt continuity. Leaders warn that questioning leads to moral decay, social chaos, or divine punishment. In reality, questioning simply tests whether traditions still hold value. Cultures evolve, languages change, and knowledge expands. The refusal to allow questions traps people in the past, often at great cost to progress. This cost can be measured. In societies where questioning religion is forbidden, science and innovation often stagnate. Compare societies that embraced free inquiry with those that suppressed it. The difference in technological, medical, and social advancement is striking. When questions are feared, not only religion suffers, but the entire society. Human creativity withers when curiosity is chained. That fear of questions does not only protect dogma, it holds back humanity itself. Another dimension worth noting is how religions use fear itself as a weapon against questions. Many doctrines teach that doubting will bring eternal punishment. The mere thought of questioning can trigger fear of hell or divine wrath. This is perhaps the most effective tool of all, because it polices not only outward behavior, but inner thought. People learn to suppress their own questions before they even reach their lips. The result is generations of minds conditioned to distrust their natural curiosity. And yet, despite all these strategies, questions persist. They rise in whispers, in private journals, in late-night conversations. The fear of questions may silence some, but it cannot erase the basic human drive to know. Every time someone wonders about contradictions, about suffering, about the silence of gods, the system trembles. That tremble is a reminder that questions are stronger than prohibitions. They may not always win immediately, but history shows they eventually prevail. One might ask, why do religions not adapt and embrace questioning? Some have tried, reframing themselves as open to dialogue. But even these attempts often stop short of the deepest questions, because to allow those would be to risk dissolving the very foundation. An institution built on unverified claims cannot survive unlimited inquiry. That is why religions, no matter how progressive they appear, always maintain certain untouchable zones. Those zones are the heart of the fear. What makes this topic profound is that it touches not only on religion, but on the human condition. To ask a question is to accept uncertainty, to embrace the unknown as a path rather than a threat. Religions fear questions because they trade in certainty, even false certainty. They fear the void that opens when an answer is revealed to be hollow. But that void is not something to fear. It is the space where real knowledge grows. Looking at history, it becomes clear that progress has always been driven by those willing to ask forbidden questions. Every discovery, every reform, every liberation began with someone who refused to be silent. Questions are not destructive. They are creative. They do not tear down meaning. They build deeper meaning. The tragedy is that religions, in fearing them, cut themselves off from this creativity. They build walls against the very force that makes us human. At the core, the fear of questions reveals a fundamental truth. Authority without evidence cannot endure scrutiny. That is why religions silence, shame, and threaten. It is not because the questions are unfair, but because they are too fair. They shine a light where darkness is necessary for control, and once the light is seen, it cannot be unseen. So, why do religions fear questions? Because questions are freedom. They are the refusal to accept chains disguised as truth. They are the voice of the human spirit, insisting that answers must be earned, not imposed. They are the first step out of ignorance and into understanding. And that is precisely why those who depend on unquestioned belief will always fear them. Now, I want to hear from you. Where are you listening from? And what time is it there right now? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to see how far this conversation reaches.